Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad, bringing you Capitalism Hits Home. Today, I want to talk about another positive change transforming the United States, because you may feel rather dismal because, the Israel-Palestine thing is depressing. The presidential race is not exactly inspiring, but there are really positive changes now, changes in connection. And I should say, even before I begin, that these are also changes in mental health. I see mental health as a four-legged table. One leg, a very strong leg here, is close personal connection. A romantic partner, a close relative, somebody that you could talk to, who you know will feel for you and be with you, and puts you right in the primary circle of their emotional life. Another is another set of friends that you feel close to, even if you don't see them all the time, but they're people who you could talk to. A third is a group with whom you participate in something. It may be a political movement, but it also may be a PTA or a blood drive or any other activity in which you are all involved because you're all supported. It could be a bowling league. It could be a team. It could be a tenant organization. It could be anything. But it's people with whom you share a conviction and with whom you know you can work together. And the fourth leg is connection to something beyond just your own life in this world. And that would be world connection. What's going on out there in the world? What's happening? I'm part of this world. I should say that one of the organizations people can participate in that might give them a sense of belonging is also a church. It doesn't have to be only secular organizations. It could be religious organizations, but not ones where you just show up once a week in order to feel you're blessed, or where you show up a couple of times a year, but something where you really feel engaged with others. And that connection is the basis of mental health. Without it, people go mad. That's why solitary confinement is considered torture in many countries of the world. I should say, as a little aside, the city council wants to forbid and has forbidden solitary confinement in New York, even though Mayor Adams has vetoed it. They have enough to get around his veto, because being isolated from all other people drives people mad. We're social creatures. We need one another. Without other people, we don't learn to do anything. Children who are abandoned but who are taken care of physically, but not psychologically, with whom we don't engage, die. If you don't engage with your child, talk to the child, hold the child, relate to the child will get something called a failure to thrive. It won't develop. They won't learn how to sit up. They won't learn how to walk. Because we need care. All of us need care and engagement with other people. I live in New York City. As I walk around the streets, I see, I've lived in New York City most of my life. I haven't seen people marching around or standing there insane, screaming or agitated or being bizarre. People are going mad because they're disconnected and have no hope. And when you go, one of the signs of insanity, this is what Lacan, Freud's most famous student in the modern age, says that the sign of insanity is when you lose language, you lose that social connectivity with other people. And what you say might make sense to yourself subjectively, but it's no longer communication with other people. One of the things that is changing against that terrible isolation that Americans have felt, as now the majority of Americans are separated or divorced when they do ever get married, because 50% end in legal separation or divorce, and then there's another at least 20% that doesn't have the money to go through the legal system, and they don't have children to fight over legally, or money to fight over legally, or possessions to fight over. So they make an arrangement with each other and they just split. Nobody counts how many they are, but I would estimate from my own experience with people as a therapist and my own knowledge of the population and their relationships, it's another 15, 20%. So we're talking about the vast majority don't even have that connection. Family used to be the primary emotional connection that people had in the United States, and that is really fast disappearing. And so within that terrible loneliness and disconnection, there is a truly positive development, and that is labor unions. Support for labor unions is now at 71%. Wow. It's a huge increase. That is the highest increase, and it's the highest presence of support for labor unions than we've had in the United States since the 1950s, before the House of Un-American Activities committees decimated our unions and drove the left apart. What happened in the 1950s is we had just emerged from World War II, where the prime ally defeating the Nazis was the Soviet Union, where Joseph Stalin was referred to on the radio as Uncle Joe, where 1 in 4 Americans was part of the Communist Party, whose slogan was, "Communism is the new Americanism." The Communist Party was everywhere in the late 40s and early 50s, and even in the mid-40s. If someone was evicted, the Communist Party would be there to put their furniture back in the apartment. When the cop left, there was a sense that they were everywhere, leading strikes, leading movements, leading the marches of the unemployed, which were tens of thousands, leading the Iowa militias in farm states, where judges who condemned family farms were hung by the local militia organized by the Communist Party, in the agricultural tenant unions that were unions of white and black tenant farmers organized by the Communist Party. There was a huge presence. And in FDR's New Deal, so many socialists and communists had positions. Frances Perkins, the first woman cabinet minister in the United States, who was the labor minister under FDR, was an avowed, proud socialist. That probably wouldn't be happening now. And the capitalists who had agreed to be taxed at 96.8%, when FDR said to them, "Listen, you better get taxed, otherwise they'll take over your whole capitalist operation," because the movement was that strong, led by the CIO, the newly organized labor union of all different ranks of workers in the same operation, and with many, many communist leaders, because the communists and socialists were the spark of the labor union movement. believing that all the world belongs to labor, fight for better advantages for labor. And the capitalists were threatened. They had lost a great deal. During FDR, they were taxed at 96.8%. Now, they're hardly taxed at all. They have corporate lawyers to get out of their tax rate, which is, I think, 34%. And they have tax exemptions. They can hide from taxes on their valuable paintings, on their gold holdings, on their overseas holdings, and so on. And so they decided, the capitalists had it. They didn't want this worker unrest, this presence of socialism and communism and leftism in the labor movement and elsewhere. And they started the anti-communist crusade, for which Joseph McCarthy is most famous. Joseph McCarthy had the House of Un-American Activities Committee, which brought charges against communists, socialists, and leftists as un-American. They made being in the Communist Party equal to trying to overthrow the government, even though there was nothing in the Communist Party admissions that mentioned overthrowing the American government. But they created a hysteria, and they were highly sponsored by those who had suffered, whose profits had suffered during World War II. And through the House Un-American Activities Committee, they got rid of, in the labor movement, they got rid of the communists, the socialists, and the left, who were the spark of the labor union, which then went out, and the labor unions atrophied. It's only now that labor unions are coming back, because people are realizing, oh my God, we have lost so much. Billionaires have made over $400 million during the pandemic years in the United States, and we have lost. And so labor is organizing, and people are supporting labor. Nearly 900,000 Americans are newly organized in the United States. And they've won pay hikes of more than 10%. More than 700,000 of those workers got pay hikes just over the last 6 months. And there's more than 300,000 that are getting ready to strike. Some of the deals of the high-profile strikes just this year, and the year isn't even done yet, were the 400,000 United Auto Workers striking against General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, and who won. And the 75,000 Kaiser workers in Kaiser Permanente healthcare, who waged the biggest healthcare strike ever in 3 days, just in this last October. Just this last year, Nurses United, 14,000 of them won pay hikes, and more nurses won pay hikes because of the threat of a strike. The Writers Guild, of 11,000 people working in Hollywood and 160,000 actors, shut down Hollywood and shut down the internet productions because they hadn't gotten increases and were exploited and went on strike. More than 171,000 workers just in the Writers Guild and the Actors Union just won double-digit pay increases in their strikes. And others won without a strike. Just the threat of a strike was enough, like the 340,000 workers in the United Parcel Service service, the UPS workers who threatened to strike and got benefits. Wow, but that's 340,000 workers. 32,000 workers at Disney World got pay hikes because of threatening a strike at Disney World. Pilots at United Airlines got a 20% hike, and flight attendants won an immediate 20% hike. They had frozen their salaries during the pandemic while they watched billionaires increase their profits. Now, this is a very interesting thing in the United States. Leaders like Shawn Fain of the UAW, whose 400,000 members got incredible pay increases after their very smart strike, said things like, "We're all fed up living in a world that values profits over people. We're fed up with seeing the rich get richer while the rest of us just scrape by. We're all fed up with corporate greed, and together we're going to fight like hell to change it." This is another quotation by Shawn Fain. The very existence of billionaires shows us that we have an economy that's working for the benefit of the few and not the many. Feels like we've gone so far backwards that we have to fight just to have the 40-hour week and win it back. Why is that? So another asshole can make enough money to shoot himself to the moon at our expense? Of course, he's referring to Bezos, who in his boredoms cheated his workers but spent $500,000 getting himself to the moon. The employer class in the United States is just 3% of the people. The employee class is 97% of the people. That's not a quotation from Shawn Fain, but that's a quotation from Harriet Fraud's reading on the internet. This is crucial in the United States. This is a crucial change. It means a de facto recognition of a class system in the United States. Class awareness just reemerged in the United States, having been suppressed in the 50s. It just reemerged in 2011 when the Occupy movement brought up the 1% versus the 99%. It was a little inaccurate. It's the 97% versus the 3%. But they reintroduced class awareness, which is why Obama had them all closed down on the same day. Even with the incredible gains, a lot of workers wanted more. They wanted to stay on strike, like the casino workers, because they felt they deserved even more. Americans are becoming militant. They have a proto-realization of class of the 97% that are employees versus the 3% who have done so very well during this pandemic, padding their billion-dollar budgets. There's a growing frustration with the status of working people while they watch the billionaires go into outer space. And that is a very important factor. It's a very important factor because no progressive movement can happen without a progressive labor movement. And these unions like the UAW or the Amazon Labor Union or the Flight Attendants Union are really militant unions. Sarah Nelson of the Flight Attendants Union says to people, you don't join a union. You don't have to join the AFL-CIO, but join a union for the power of your unions. And that's a de facto realization that in the anti-communist crusades, the AFL-CIO kicked all the progressives out of their unions and left their unions flat and without militants. And the new unions are militant. And they need to be, because we can't have progressive movements without progressive labor behind us. If we look at the amazingly and startlingly progressive developments that have happened in the world, abortion rights in Ireland, an overwhelmingly officially Catholic country, or the abortion rights movement in Argentina, a Catholic country. Abortion rights won, even though the Pope himself went to Argentina to campaign against abortion rights. But in both of those abortion victories, the progressive union movement united along with the climate activists, the racial activists, the gender activists, the sexual rights activists, all for abortion rights in both countries. And if we look at the revolutions that have happened recently, or the progressive leaders that are elected, whether they're the revolutions in Colombia, in South America, or in Chile, or the very progressive ascent of Lula in Brazil, they ascended because they were coalitions. They were coalitions of the progressive labor movement with the indigenous movements, with the climate activists, with the racial rights activists, with the sexual rights activists, all together. Like an umbrella, as I have said before, which I think is the metaphor we need, that the central post of that umbrella is class, to erase class oppression, erase the 3%, 93%, and spread the wealth. But each panel is attached to that one unifying staff, the panel of sexual rights activists, gender activists, racial activists, indigenous activists, climate activists, and all other activists who have a common need to change class in America, to change the distribution of wealth and power in this country. And this is a hopeful time. In spite of the sadness we see around us, in spite of the ascendancy of billionaires at everyone else's expense, in spite of the mental health tragedies we see on our streets, in spite of the migrants who are shut out and living on the streets, labor is raising its head and being counted for all of us. And the mental health benefits are that if you're a worker working all alone and being exploited, chances are you'll be depressed. You're alone, you're ripped off. On some level, you know it and you feel it. And the only voice you have in your head is the dominant voice, which is the voice of the employer class. It's a very disempowering experience. You may sit in front and just eat your heart out, causing an obesity epidemic, which is wild. In West Virginia, they've started double caskets and using derricks to lift the dead into the graves because they're so fat. But that's because people were eating their hearts out. And there's a huge mental health benefit for joining a union because you're not exploited alone. You're part of a group, and you're part of a group that says, I don't deserve this, and says it together with each other's support. I have a client who recently told me how moved he was when someone tried to use race to tell him to shut up because he's only white. He's a white male in a union that has many black people. And a fellow unionist said, that's my brother. That's my union brother. And one of the things Martin Luther King emphasized when he talked to the Longshoremen's Union is the best way to achieve racial equality and equality in this nation is through unions. And if that's the case, we are doing well. There's a real avenue of hope for America in the burgeoning labor union movement, because labor is becoming militant and class conscious with leaders like Shawn Fain and Sarah Nelson. Thank you. This Capitalism Hits Home podcast was brought to you by Democracy at Work, which wants democracy at the workplace where workers decide, as well as everywhere else in our lives, to empower us together, because together we can also have some sense of being mentally okay. And isolated and apart and exploited, we can't. We need each other. If you're inspired by this program, please click onto Democracy at Work and see all they have to offer. And if you're further inspired, send a donation, because in this capitalist economy, money talks so loudly that we do need money. Thank you so much. Goodbye for now.